So, welcome to the second episode of Chasing-the-Dream. I'm Ethan Chazin, a New York-based organizational development coach, and I work with organizations to help unleash the power of their people. I can't even begin to say how excited I am to have our special guest, Adam Rabinovitch, with us today. Adam, welcome to Chasing-the-Dream.
Thank you, Ethan. Great to be with you. Really appreciate the invite and getting to spend some time with you and your audience and sharing a bit about me and about COPE as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to dive right in. So just by way of reference and introduction, I want to share with the audience that Adam has spent 30 years of experience in leadership with nonprofit and for-profit organizations, and with a particular focus on business development, strategic planning, and revenue generation, with an emphasis on improving health and educational outcomes for traditionally underserved communities. And in his current role as executive director with COPE, which is a nonprofit grief and healing organization, which is dedicated to helping parents and families living with the loss of a child. And as a sidebar for our audience, Adam, the mission of COPE is particularly meaningful to you as a bereaved sibling living with the loss of your sister Marnette from childhood. So thank you again for appearing on Chasing-the-Dream. And let's dive right into it, if you're ready.
Born ready and ready to do it. Thanks for that intro, and also for recognizing my family's connection to the work that I'm so proud to lead and do with COPE today. So really appreciate that.
Well, let's talk about that, because one of the things that really struck me when we first got to know each other was just how passionate you are about being involved with organizations that share your values. And I would just ask, throughout your career, you've always been aligned with organizations that were doing amazing things. And I guess my curiosity is, from a value perspective, where does that come from?
That's a great question. It's something that I think about a lot. And I guess as each passing year goes on, I think about it both from where it came from and how I can pass it along. So I'm wearing a bunch of hats as I talk to you today, including I'm a son. So a lot of the values that I received and continue to receive are from my parents, and they're still with us and still with me, and passing along shared values that my brother and sister and I all have in common as well. And a lot of that comes out in the work that we do. And it's also now coming out for myself as a father of a teenage daughter. And I'll say also on behalf of my brother and sister, for my nieces and nephews, we're passing that along to the next generation. And that is shared values of inclusivity, connectedness, and paying it forward. So when we talk more, you and I, about some of the work that I've done and how I'm trying to pay it forward, it's both by taking the values that have been shared with me, and then hopefully leaving a legacy and as a role model for my daughter and anyone who's paying attention from the next generation as well.
I almost had to prompt myself to jump right back in, because I was it's so impactful to talk with you, Adam, about the importance of values that you share with your family and how those are reinforced, and how you kind of go about looking at those in the lens of the organizations that are lucky enough to work with you. And I would guess I'd ask just that for our audience. How do you take those values that are so central, such a fiber of your being, and how do you kind of pollinate that over into the work that you've done throughout your career, and especially with regard to your current role as executive director at COPE?
The way that I bring values, and I love that word pollinate, really, because there is such an iterative process where my values become part of a culture, and they don't take over the culture, but they certainly do get pollinated. So using COPE as an example, and I've been leading the organization as the executive director. When we're recording this conversation, it's been just over 5 years. And even before I joined the organization, or I should say, especially before I joined the organization, there was a crucial and critical kind of get to know you period between some of the stakeholders and myself to make sure that our values were and are aligned, so that once I joined and took the mantle of leadership as the executive director, the so-called ED of the organization, it wasn't a push to get the value proposition, so to speak, aligned, because we had already established it in broad strokes. We were on the same page. So the way that I continue to do that, especially as new stakeholders join under our big tent, join the party, so to speak, that they also know what they're signing up for. And again, in the case of
And yeah, just not to kind of steal your thunder, but I
no,
really
please.
that's a really powerful statement, and I'd love to just kind of dive in a little bit on that particular note. Is how do you socialize the values that, as you said, when you bring people into the organization, they all share a sense of mission under that one tent? Like, how do you kind of live those values? Because we can
Yes.
talk generically about culture, and some people would even say, hey, Adam, it's easier, especially in a mission-driven organization. But how do you make sure that other people who come into the organization or are considering it share those values?
Yeah. So the hop, skip, and the jump is leading by example, and also setting into, if not stone, at least a pretty concrete shared vision and core value set that people are going to buy into or not. So I'll use again COPE as an example. When I joined the organization, there was not a clear vision or value statement, but we quickly agreed and set it into documentation. It's on the website of the organization, and it's become the mantra that no one needs to grieve alone. No one needs to grieve alone. So what that represents is, again, this notion of inclusivity and connectedness, so that anyone who's going to sign up as a donor, a volunteer, a board member, a staff member, they know that the North Star for the organization is that we are going to connect with all kinds of people. And the contrast is that perhaps in the early days of the organization, there wasn't that vision or North Star, or at least we weren't able as an organization to operationalize it. So perhaps the impact was narrower than it is today. And so that people who are now finding out about the organization, who didn't know about it for the first 25 years, know that this is an inclusive, broad-based vision. And again, if they choose to align with those values, welcome. And if not, there's lots of other great resources that they can connect to.
You know, I stop and I think about no one grieves alone. And you had shared with me in a prior conversation that vetting period when you were having conversations, as you said, going on 5 years ago, to make sure that there was a suitable fit, right, with you and the organization's values. When you sat down, or your organization sat down recently and did a vision, mission, values exercise where you reframed them and reinforced them, what did that entail? Just not just the process itself, but bringing in all the vested stakeholders, from employees, the internal stakeholders, constituents, and organizations in the community you serve. What was that process like for you in terms of learning experience and just getting everybody on board under the umbrella of no one should grieve alone?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So my listening tour never really ends, but after I joined the organization, I had to move from listening to listening and doing in close to real time. So making sure that people were not only feeling heard with their experiences, the folks who had helped to get the organization from startup to 20 years in, not only feel that they were being heard, but really that their experiences could help shape and form what the next 25 years are going to look like. So one piece of the puzzle has been the ability to measure our impact and to storytell about that. And what that means is to take a look using data and using the lived experiences of the people who are in our network at COPE, drilling down and getting a real understanding of what we've done well and what we could do better, and then being ready to see what that data, what the story tells, and make course corrections. And I'll pause there, and then I'll tell you how we came out of it.
This is a fantastic, I think, kind of hands-on deck approach, because I want to ask meaningful questions around the actual experience that you went through. And so my first kind of question that I hear is the data and having a objective, measurable way to kind of track the narrative arc,
Yeah.
right? The story you're telling. What did that entail? What was some of the data and what were the benchmarks? How did you measure successful kind of integration of the vision, mission, values, and how are you consistently keeping a finger on the pulse that you're navigating towards that North Star of no one should grieve alone?
Yes. So it's a twofold process. One was and is understanding who are our clients, our customers, the families that count on us, and what they look like, demographically speaking, across a whole bunch of domains, by age, by ethnicity, by race, by socioeconomic background, and then being, again, really ready to follow what that data shows and have the courage to make some, again, I use the word course corrections, but the other part of it is investments in the organization to be able to move on what the data says. So what the data said for us, and it's shifting now, is that we were serving too narrow a population, and not inclusive enough for the kinds of community members who deserve and need the support that we offer, but we weren't reaching them. And I'll be very specific about that in a second. So first, we needed to know who we're serving as best as we could, and what that means in terms of the quote, the market. The other piece of data that's critical is to know what the gaps in service are, in our case, for providing grief and bereavement support, and who is in the, you've heard terms like underserved or under-resourced. Where are there gaps in health access, including mental health, which is where we fit squarely, in bereavement and grief support, and what needs to be done, and what role can our organization and our culture play in meeting those under-resourced and underserved community members. And that's where we are today. And if you'd like, I can talk more specifically about how we're meeting that, but it became crystal clear that the historical track record of our impact, which was not insignificant, there was a lot more that we could do. And now we're in the figuring it out mode and the doing mode on starting to meet that North Star vision of no one needs to grieve alone. Still a work in progress.
Right. As most amazing workplace cultures are, they're constantly evolving organically.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
we've talked about that a little bit in prior conversations. But I guess where I would just take the conversation now is you've done such a phenomenal job of mapping out the trajectory of your 5-year engagement and trying to keep a finger on the pulse of the relationships that you cultivate externally with the communities that you serve. And I guess my question is, might we turn the looking glass in a little bit inside COPE to kind of take a look at the people in a little bit more kind of granular detail? What are the kinds of ways in which you make sure that you have the right people in the right roles who not only are capable of doing amazing work, but to ensure from as early on as the hiring process that you're finding people who you're confident live and breathe the vision and mission and values, because after all, they're the ones who have to be the brand ambassadors for COPE.
Yes.
So I guess that would be my question.
So well said.
Yeah.
So well said. So it's so critical. And as I'm speaking to you today, we're in the next phase of hiring and onboarding some new to us kinds of talent in some exciting areas. So just to look forward, that mission connection is critical. And I think we all know that people choose, regardless of whatever kind of labor market it might be, whether they're a paid staff member or a consultant or a volunteer board member, certainly a donor. People choose where they want to put their time, talent, and energy. So it's critical to know that once we get through whatever dance we're going through and we align and we say, okay, we're going to work together, that this is going to be a passion project for that person, so that no one's phoning it in. One example which really impressed me and continues to is that the board of directors, which in our nonprofit corporation, like so many, are made up of committed volunteers, hard baked or built into the constitution of the organization, to the bylaws, that a majority of the serving board members need to be mission aligned, meaning a bereaved family member living with the loss of a child, a brother, or a sister. So someone who's not only going through their own grief journey, but is so close to the mission and the impact, the intended impact of COPE, that they are almost by definition bought in, and therefore with some level of coaching are going to be that brand ambassador that you talked about. And what I mean by that is, because they're so connected and passionate about the mission, they can be the best storytellers that we have on why people should pay attention to the work that we do.
And that, to me, you had touched on that, and when we spoke before about the buy-in that you get from the board itself because of the alignment with their own personal experience. So you've got your own personal experience as ED there. You've got the board kind of overseeing from, they've already bought in. You're building a foundation, a culture where people come into COPE, understand the vision, the mission, they understand the value construct, and you're constantly building relationships externally with the communities that you serve. And so my thought is, or my question for those who are in not-for-profit organizations as well, and they're listening to kind of hear from Adam what they can gain. The other piece of this is fundraising, right? It's generating revenue, as you said, grants, in-kind donations, kind of, how, if at all, do you strategically align the culture that you're building and the tribe that you're building with shared values into the ability to generate revenues on behalf of COPE to fund all of the critical initiatives, especially as I'm sure you've already mapped out your 2024 plan and you're looking to kind of generate funding sources? How do you do that, if at all?
And I just want the Chazin-the-Dream audience to know that Ethan and I did not script this, but we're mind melding here, because I was going to use the same word, tribe. So one of my fundraising coaches and mentors talks about finding your tribe in an organization, and because there's so many critical missions out there in the world, because there's so many trusted and relevant organizations meeting those missions, and because there's enough capital and donor dollars out there, it's really, really important for fundraising leaders to identify and find their tribe, lean into that. I'll talk about what I mean by that in a second, and the rest can be noise. In other words, figure out who are the first, second. You talk a lot, Ethan, in your work about circles of influence and sort of that positive ripple effect. So finding who are the first level connectors, maybe the second level and even third level connectors, and bringing them in. So one of the things that's been clear and clearer to me, and some of this, again, we're recording now coming out of an international pandemic. We're talking as things like fentanyl overdoses continue to go through the roof, and gun violence and deaths, all of the elements of our society that are leading to death, grief, and bereavement show me that our tribe can really be approaching universal, because so many people are touched by grief, loss, and hopefully healing, that we can appeal to a broader audience, assuming that we make the case and show our impact. And
I'd be remiss at this point if I didn't kind of say, as kind of a PSA to the audience, the listening audience, that when you and I first spoke, we talked about your work and we talked about some of my work, obviously, but where we came together was the intersection of, we both, as did everybody, go through a global pandemic. And you and I, when we started talking about the pain that still resonates, and it's under the surface, right? So like, people, I guess, think COVID has passed us. We're not allowed to feel the way that we feel, but nearly everybody is walking around feeling some kind of residual effects. And when you and I just started talking organically over a year ago, we both had kind of similar thoughts about this. And this is kind of how you build your tribe of, for you, ED at COPE, your culture there with your people. You've got a really supportive board. You're pathologically focused at creating bridges with your external constituents, your external stakeholders, and you're leveraging that for fundraising. But the last piece of the puzzle that I'd love to just spend like a minute or two kind of chatting about is the way we connected, right? We share certain values and beliefs. And when we met each other, it just was very clear that we were under the same tent. So I guess I'm curious, when you go about wearing your hat for executive director Cope or fundraising for Heller Group, how is it that you resonate with other people who share your values, and therefore you say, these are people that I can work with and cultivate relationships, especially post-COVID? I know that that was a long question.
Well, it's been a long exercise in my life to try and answer that question for you, for anyone who is listening, and for myself. So I'm a continual work in progress as well. And I'll give an example. In my life and my family, we didn't talk about my sister, who you were so kind to mention at the top of our conversation, my sister Marnit, who was born ill and died very young. My brother and sister never got to meet her. And my parents and I very rarely talked or talk about Marnit, or what it is to be in this club that no one wants to belong to. A family is living with the loss of a child in particular. So flash forward now to the last 5 years, I've been doing my own internal work to find ways that I can be comfortable or uncomfortable sharing our family's story. And what's become a virtuous cycle is I've found that the more that I do that in an authentic and transparent and inclusive way to whoever I'm talking to, almost inevitably that sparks a conversation and a connection point where the person that I'm connecting with, whether they're a potential donor or representing an institution that might want to get involved with the work that we do, there becomes a most fundamental foundational human connection, because inevitably they are living with the loss of a loved one as well. So that spark is assuming that I can blow in that spark and we can co-create that bridge that you were talking about together. That's the human element that really can help a relationship flourish, and so that none of these relationships are transactional. They can be really transformational using that core.
And therefore, as we kind of think about today and moving forward, you're not chasing the dream. Meaning that you are day in, day out consistently living the dream of your life, of sharing your values with your family and your peers and everybody who comes into contact with you in your personal and professional journey. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you so much again, Adam, for agreeing to come on this little program. And hey, let me ask you a question. So as we wrap up our time together today, if somebody wants to reach out to you or find you, what's the best way to them to learn more about Adam Rabinovitch and COPE?
Yes. The best way to learn about us and find out a whole bunch of resources for whoever's listening, anyone you love or care about in your life who might need some support, and those who want to support the organization and work we do, is our website, which is copefoundation.org. copefoundation.org. I know you'll be sharing that in the show notes as well. So thank you for helping get the word out.
There will be a link to everybody listening. There will be a link to all of Adam's pertinent information below. So be sure to, subscribe and send him a like. But again, Adam, I just want to thank you for taking some time to appear on Chazin-the-Dream.
You're welcome. And thank you so much for having me and giving me the chance to share just a little bit about the stories of the families that we care so much about and support at COPE. So thanks, Ethan, for the work you do.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you, everybody. That concludes our second session, Chasing the Dream. Take care.